And I have a short slide deck that I'd like to walk through. Whoops. Help if I shared my screen first. All righty. So first and foremost, thank you so much to everyone for coming today, for attending. I'm very excited to speak to the group a bit about Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence. We'll get into a few things today. Like I said, I do have a few slides that I would like to walk through. Following that, there was actually a fantastic training, what we hear Microsoft call Ninja training, for Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence that was published toward the end of October of this year. That's very, very valuable. So I just wanted to call out a few points within that training for the group that I think are super valuable. And then I will pivot into Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence to show off some of the features of the product. And then, as Caden said, we'll close out with any questions that the group has. Okay, so before we get started, a bit about myself. As I said, my name is Michael Flick. I am a threat intelligence global black belt. I live in Pittsburgh. I came to Microsoft with the acquisition of RiskIQ last year. When I was with RiskIQ, I served as a solutions architect prior to joining RiskIQ. I was in various threat and vulnerability management roles in both the manufacturing and financial sectors. And then the first job that I had out of school was as an e-commerce fraud analyst. And fun fact, was actually for a contract with Microsoft. So happily, I've come back to work yet again for Microsoft. Education. I do have 2 BAs in intelligence studies and Russian studies. Intelligence studies, that is, as we are talking about today, threat intelligence, cyber intelligence, traditional intelligence, not the general intelligence, as many like to joke. And then also a master's science in information security policy and management. Some of my interests, I do have a family, 2 boys, 2 and 6.5. They keep me extraordinarily busy. When we can, I like getting outside with them. I like to read, and I am slowly, ever since the start of COVID, have been working on building my home bar and getting very into mixology. So, as I said, I came to Microsoft when RiskIQ was acquired back in July of 2021. One of the most common questions we get is, well, why did Microsoft choose RiskIQ? Well, it's safe to say that Microsoft saw an opportunity to create the industry's most complete and relevant threat intelligence platform by acquiring RiskIQ. In doing so, Microsoft began pairing the broad internet-focused picture that RiskIQ brought to the table with its own excellent visibility within the firewall, inside the firewall. Now that the acquisition is complete, we were able to launch our products, our new products, Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence and Microsoft Defender Enterprise Attack Surface Management in August earlier this year. So together, we now have the highest fidelity picture of the current state of cybersecurity. And we do this by combining data from 4 of the world's largest public clouds, protecting over 1.5 billion endpoints across the planet, and that entire internet graph that I mentioned that RiskIQ brings to the table. So a few further stats as we look down the slide that go with our Better Together story are that we now have insight into over 43 trillion security signals, over 15 billion internet observations, We now have, as a combined team, over 8,500 dedicated security researchers and engineers, and access to over 72 billion blocked threats. So as I said before, today's conversation is going to be centered on Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence. But as I understand it, there are a number of other sessions happening this week. So that said, I would be super thankful if anybody that finds today interesting would join me on Thursday, later in the week, to learn more about our other product, Microsoft Defender Enterprise Attack Surface Management. But today's conversation is going to be focused on Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence. So when we talk about Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence, it helps to keep in mind that the view that's presented within the platform, within the API, is that of a defender looking outward at the entire internet. So MDTI, it's our platform that streamlines multiple cybersecurity tasks when conducting threat infrastructure analysis and gathering threat intelligence. It's not uncommon for security analysts to consult multiple different repositories to gather important data sets that are needed to assess suspicious domain, an IP address, vulnerability, or even a threat actor. Some of the data sets, DNS, WHOIS, malware, SSL certificates. These data sets can provide important context, but are often widely distributed and don't share the same data structures often. So obviously this adds time to an analyst's investigation, and that's a resource which is already limited and increasingly valuable. So MDTI is meant to aggregate and enrich these and other data sources, and yield back that valuable time to the analyst that's conducting an investigation. So with MDTI, users can identify adversaries and their malicious infrastructure at a global scale. When using MDTI, as I said before, it gives you that inside out view of the internet, can therefore help the analyst understand vulnerabilities from the endpoint to the internet. MDTI can also accelerate remediation with the internet threat intelligence that's presented, again, both within the platform and via the API. And finally, can also integrate with existing security infrastructure and enhance prevention and improve your posture. We'll get into some of that integration later on in the slide and as we work through the blog post. So let's take a quick look at what's under the hood for MDTI. In order to provide the data and context needed for the aforementioned tasks, we first need to gather the data. So that is conducted in a few different ways. First and foremost, we operate a vast number of web crawlers that act as virtual users. These virtual users are coming from a variety of geolocations. They are using a number of different browser types. And the purpose behind this is to emulate a real user on the internet. Why we're looking to do that is we want to appear as though we're just an everyday user that is, surfing the internet. And this way, we're confident in that we can, get the most holistic picture of not only what the internet looks like, but what threat actors look like on the internet, along with their infrastructure that they've set up. We also conduct light scanning of the IPv4 space across a number of the most common ports, most commonly used ports, and we also have a number of passive DNS sensors. This network gathers many passive DNS resolutions. We store that data and use it to develop our internet graph. And finally, we do have relationships with select third parties to pull in additional data that we're not able to gather ourselves. Once we've gathered that data, we conduct some analysis and automation. What I mean by that, we apply machine learning and some AI processes to that data that we've gathered to develop what we call the global internet graph. This global internet graph, using this graph, we're able to identify threat actor infrastructure and how it changes over time. And then finally, we present the data in two ways. First, it's presented to you in its essentially raw form to facilitate your own investigation and research. That can happen directly within the UI or again, using the API. Second, we also use the data ourselves to create finished intelligence. And these products we call articles. So these articles contain our own research conducted by that 8,500 researchers and engineers that I mentioned before, and are made available for your consumption. So when we talk about MDTI, what draws customers to the platform? Well, first and foremost, conducting advanced investigations. I already mentioned that it's not uncommon for analysts to have to consult multiple different tools to, gather the different data sets that they need in order to conduct their investigation or the research that they're doing. So in order to consolidate that, shorten the amount of time, we gather all of that data and make it available in a single platform. Second, the articles that I mentioned. So that's not all teams have the bandwidth to conduct their own investigation and find increasing value on finished intelligence. Well, that comes in the format of the articles that I mentioned in the last slide. When we talk about the articles, there are technically two sources that come into holistic sources that come into the platform. First, we collect a number of OSINT, open source articles, and make them available in the platform. With those open source articles, we also use that same team of researchers and engineers will review those articles and add any data that we're able to enrich into those articles for consumption within the platform. And then, of course, the original published articles that that dedicated team of researchers and engineers develop on their own. Reputation scoring. So within the platform, you'll see this as we pivot into MDTI later in today's conversation. But we make available a reputation score. So when we're looking at domains or IP addresses, we present a calculated severity scoring for IPs, domains, and hosts that are based on threats and observations that we've made in our data sets. And finally, projects. So it can be difficult for teams to collaborate on research or investigations that they are performing. People change shifts, people leave. In order to kind of reduce the strain that's presented by some of these happenings, we make projects available within the platform. And all projects are a single space where users can save any of the artifacts that they're looking into within the platform. Notes for those artifacts, projects that they've developed, so there is no gap in analysis between teams or individuals on teams conducting the analysis. So how SIM and XDR are enhanced with MTI? So today we have an integration with Microsoft Sentinel where data indicators of compromise are available within Sentinel in a threat intel blade, so to speak, within Sentinel. And all that is data that comes from a couple block lists that we have access to within MDTI and surface, and are compared to different internal logs that might be available within Sentinel to highlight the detections that might be related to intelligence we have within DTI. Some of that deeper explanation for what that looks like and how it works is contained within that blog. So I'll make sure that I call that out once we get into the blog. So who benefits from MDTI? A number of teams. First and foremost, security operations. When security operations teams are looking at data that are collected from a variety of defense tools to analyze events, the additional context that DTI can provide can be invaluable. Incident response, similar situation, looking into a compromised host, suspected compromised hosts, the context that DTI can provide on a suspicious domain, IP address, some artifact of that nature can be invaluable and shorten that length of time for an investigation. Similarly with threat hunting, and then cyber threat intelligence analysis, identifying and tracking cyber threats to your own organization and working with other teams to reduce that risk. That can bring together the projects that I mentioned that are available within DTI. That's a fantastic way for teams to collaborate directly within DTI to perform an investigation on a specific threat actor or campaign that might be targeting your organization. And then lastly, cybersecurity research. As I said, we do publish finished intelligence within the platform, but should you so choose, you can absolutely create some of your own fantastic threat intelligence by conducting your own research. The attackers are attacking you. So you have, fantastic insight into what's actively targeting your organization. Using that data and what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, you can use that within MDTI to conduct and develop your own threat intelligence. So as I said, short deck for today. I would like to pivot into the blog now, but I admittedly did not have the chat up. I'll do a quick check to see if there are any questions that we could get into first. Okay, nothing. All right. So that being said, I will roll on into the blog post. So as I said, this blog post came out at the end of October and is a ninja training for Defender Threat Intelligence. Let me start by saying this is a fantastic resource. And if anyone on the call today is truly interested in learning more about DTI, I highly recommend that and I will take this as I'm talking, take this link and drop it in the chat. That you navigate to this post, check it out. It is very in-depth. It will go through a number, I think there are four parts. 4 parts to this, to the ninja training. First is an overview, and then data collection, threat analysis, and the different data sets that are available in DTI. Integrated use cases, that's the area where you will find further information on how DTI works with Sentinel. And then lastly, using Defender TI for cyber threat investigations. That's going to cover how to use projects, some best practices for using projects, and understanding and using the finished intelligence that we make available within the platform. So I said that there were a few things that I wanted to call out in this blog. First was, and possibly most importantly, there's interest in DTI. Well, how do I sign up for an account? So there are 2 different levels of account that are possible within DTI. The first is just a regular free account. All you have to do is navigate to I will pass this link in the chat for whoops, excuse me. Didn't click happy. Pass this in the chat for everyone. For a free account, all you need to do is navigate to the tool itself and set up an account. This will give you access into the tool. However, some of the data sets that are available within DTI are going to be limited. So what do I mean by that? For example, I believe Whois is going to be limited to only the previous, hosting history is only going to be available for the past 10 days instead of when we first detected a specific domain popping up on the internet. So you get a reduced view into some of the data sets that we make available within DTI. Second, excuse me, would be the premium membership. And that is activated within M365, the M365 Admin Center. Upon activation, you get a free 30-day trial. With the 30-day trial, you get access to the entire data set that is available within DTI. And then after that 30 days, you would need to purchase a premium license to continue on with the full access into the data sets offered through DTI. Yes, private preview. I can't remember if I already made mention to this before, but if there is genuine interest in what you're seeing here today, and this is definitely something that you'd like to, learn more about, play around with, then I also highly suggest that after you set up an account, you join our private preview. So if you join our private preview, you're going to receive new information about the product as soon as it's coming out. Some examples of that data. So right now, if you were to join the private preview, you would gain access to the API. The API for DTI is currently in private preview. So are threat actor profiles. So threat actor profiles is going to be a different section within DTI that, as the name suggests, is going to contain data on threat actors that are being tracked not only by Microsoft, but many of the other threat intel providers that exist out there today. So we'll have that information along with, excuse me, tactics, techniques, and procedures, vulnerabilities that have been exploited or targeted by those threat actors, and any finished threat intelligence that we have previously published within the platform that are related to that specific threat actor. One of the other pieces that I wanted to call attention to within the blog post, data sets. So we only touched on this within the slides, but I wanted to highlight a list here somewhere, maybe not. Okay, but some of the data sets that are available within DTI. So if I click back here, I know there's a list. Here we go. So resolutions, all that means is a domain that is resolving to a specific IP address, Whois information, SSL certificates, subdomains. Everyone here can read the rest of the different data types that are available within DTI for your use. But if you pivot over to this, get to know the data sets and how to use them during investigations, this again is part of the Ninja training, but it will unpack each data set and give an example use case for how you would conduct an investigation. For example, why should I care about cookies that we have available within DTI? Well, threat actors can be lazy. In setting up a phishing page that might be targeting your organization, they may scrape your page, and in doing so, scrape your page to set up their own phishing page targeting your organization. In doing so, they may capture any cookies that are present on your login page. Because we have the insight that we do into into these data sets, we're able to capture that relationship and make it available within DTI. So as you're conducting your own investigations using DTI, you'll be able to see that connection. And the last piece that I wanted to make sure I called attention to was just the Defender TI detections in Microsoft Sentinel. So if you come down to this module, module 4, open this link, it will take you to the article that explains more in depth on the relationship DTI currently has with Sentinel, what that threat intelligence blade looks like, and how to get that set up. So as I said, I highly suggest if you do have an interest in learning more about DTI, come to navigate to the 400 Ninja training, read through the article. There is a lot to digest here, but it is absolutely worth it. Alex did a fantastic job with pulling this all together, and it is a fantastic resource. All right, so I see that there were some questions that came into the chat. It looks like Ryan is keeping up with them. I see another one just popped in from Stacy. How about scans for typo squatting? I can take that one real fast. So you can absolutely search for different domains that might be typo squatting your against one of your brands or one of your schools, since we're talking to education here today. But as we existed with RiskIQ previous to the acquisition by Microsoft, there was a dedicated tool for identifying those typo squats. That was called external threats, RiskIQ's external threats. We're currently discussing what that tool might look like under the Microsoft ecosystem. But don't have anything published in the roadmap yet officially. Absolutely, keep the community updated to what's coming down the pipe for that capability. But as far as like scans for, let me feed in specific logic, keyword logic into DTI, that's not a capability that's supported today. So hopefully that answers your question, Stacy. Okay. The last piece that I wanted to do today was take a quick spin through MDTI itself. A couple things that I did want to show everyone on the call today. So I think I pasted this in here earlier. Yes, I did. Excellent. As I said, if you if you navigate to the ti.defender.microsoft.com, you can set up a free account today. You will have limited access into the data sets, but you can start playing around with what DTI can do. So once you log into the platform, the main screen is going to display a search bar and a number of articles that have been uploaded or published directly into DTI. So if we scroll down and look at some of the finished intelligence, so you'll notice that there are a number of tags that are present for the articles within DTI. Let's click on this first one here. Copernicium. All right, overview of Copernicium's recent C2 infrastructure. So if we look here and read the tags, and if this MDTI tag is present, that means that this article is an article that was published internally. So this is not something that we obtained through OSINT. This is a homegrown finished threat intelligence piece that came from that team of 8,500 researchers that I mentioned before during the slide deck. So within the finished threat and intelligence articles, you'll see three different headings. First and foremost, the description. What the description is going to contain, fairly straightforward. The overview, the meat of the article. As you scroll down through, you'll see any of the IOCs that are associated with the article that was published. But then if you come back up to the top, you'll see two more tabs, public indicators and Defender TI indicators. So if we shift over to public indicators, you will see any indicators that are associated with the article that are available to the general public. What that means. So for example, for an open source article, if it's something that we pulled in from another intelligence provider or another research entity off of the internet, then all of the indicators available within that article are going to be located here in the public indicators tab. We shift over to the Defender TI indicators. These are indicators that are not available to the general public and have been added to the article in question by our own threat intelligence researchers. So thinking back to the slide deck, when I first showed that slide of, well, what's the Better Together story now that RiskIQ has been acquired by Microsoft? That number I keep coming back to and flubbing, admittedly, that 8,500 number for security researchers and engineers. So that's one of the pieces that most excites me has most excited me about our acquisition, is the access to the minds, so to speak, within RiskIQ and now Microsoft. So with the research that happens and publication of these finished intelligence articles, we're drawing from teams, not only our own, the threat researchers that we brought from RiskIQ, but the excellent and very professional minds at Microsoft that are members of DART, Mystic, and a number of other teams across Microsoft. So we have, I say that number again, over 8,500 researchers that are all contributing to the finished intelligence that goes into DTI. So users are truly getting, just a fantastic source of finished threat intelligence now that we've brought all of these individuals and these teams together to publish useful content within the platform. So we've taken a look at what finished intelligence looks like within the platform. One of the things that I haven't yet shown, so say you're reading down through and you see a specific IP address, domain that's called out in an article. If you click that, you will pivot to that specific artifact within DTI. So that is one way of gathering more information on a specific artifact, or if you are, say, a security operations analyst that is analyzing some logs for a recent security event, and you find a suspicious domain that you want to gain more information into, throwing that domain up in the search bar and clicking go would get the same or similar results for what you're seeing here for the IP. So pivotable, searchable, yes, it's all possible within DTI. Looking at the IP address that we've pivoted on, we're going to see a variety of information that's available to you, the user. First and foremost, think back to the slide deck, reputation score. Excuse me, that's going to appear right at the top of the screen. And we, with the reputation score, we show you what went into calculating that score. So if we come down here, we'll see that for this IP address, we can see that it is in a RiskIQ Intel article, the one that we were just looking at. The SSL certificate user, certificates by this issue are frequently associated with suspicious behavior. It belongs to an ASN that frequently exhibits suspicious behavior, and an SSL cert that is associated to this IP is self-signed and lacks verified ownership, therefore may not be trustworthy. So we will show you all of the elements that go into calculating that reputation score. Excuse me. Up at the top again, I kind of skipped over this, but we will also show you first seen when we first observed and last observed the specific asset that was queried for IP addresses, the net block that it belongs to, what ASN it belongs to, and the owning organization of the IP block and ASN. I actually had a domain queued up for investigation here. So just to highlight the fact that, okay, we pivoted to this IP from an article, but I'm a SOC analyst and I see this funky domain pop up in one of the alerts that I see and want more context on it. I can throw it into the search bar and say, hey, MDTI, show me what you know about this webrootupdate.com. So looking down, we see that familiar reputation score and the pieces that went into calculating that. I see here, cyber threat intel. There is a group that is associated with that particular domain. Similar piece, infrastructure is hosted by this ASN, is frequently exhibits suspicious behavior. If I go down to the analyst insights, so analyst insights are meant to be quick pieces of information that help an investigating analyst make a decision at a faster pace. So what I mean by that here, not things that were not triggered. The resolving IP, if it were an IP, is not blocklisted. There are no subdomains in history, and it's not an international domain. If this domain were registered 2 days ago, then I would see an insight here that says something to the effect of newly registered domain. So that might lead me to dig down a little bit deeper to say, this is a relatively new domain and it's showing up in my logs. What's going on with this domain? Unfortunately, I am not able to delve into the threat intel profiles today, as it is still in private preview. But again, I encourage everyone here, if you are interested, sign up for an account. Truly interested, register for the private preview, and that's something that you can evaluate. Any articles that are associated with the queried domain will show up here. Same with resolutions. So what IP addresses has this domain ever resolved to? SSL certificates associated with it, and any projects. So that's going to be maybe somebody else from the previous SOC shift was working on an investigation for webrootupdate.com. If they saved it into a project, then that would show up here. So scrolling back up to the top, we were exploring the summary data tab. Summary tab. If we pivot into the data tab, we're going to see a bit more information about the domain that we're investigating. So, first and foremost, resolutions. What IP addresses has this domain ever resolved to? Who is information as we are able to get it? So Namecheap could be suspicious for sure. Any subdomains that are associated with the, that are off of the webrootupdate.com domain will also show up here. Components. So components are going to be things like Nginx, server types, things of that nature that we are able to identify associated with the queried asset. We're going to make those available here for your investigation as well. Host pairs. So no host pairs for this particular domain. But this would be any relationships that, as we're doing that crawling activity that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if a certain crawl starts on a specific domain, but then something redirects it to another domain, then we will capture that relationship and make it available within DTI. So for example, something on webroot update redirects you to badguy.com. That relationship, if captured by our crawlers, would be outlined here as the parent would be webrootupdate.com and child as badguy.com. Along with when we first saw it, when we last saw it, why that relationship was made. Maybe there was a reference from that particular webrootupdate.com to badguy.com, and that would be outlined here under cause. I see we're coming up on the time here, so as to not waste too much more time and leave plenty of time for questions. Host pairs, we just covered host pairs. Cookies, we briefly touched on cookies before. Any cookies we are able to obtain through the crawling of assets are going to be available here. DNS entries, any A records, MX records, text records, all of that data for the domain in question is going to be available here as well. Reverse DNS, articles and projects in the data tab as well. So we've already talked about two asset types being queried within the platform: domains and IP addresses. Just to highlight the flexibility of DTI, I did want to show you have the ability to query vulnerabilities as well. So if you know a specific vulnerability that you'd like more information on, you can throw that CVE number into the search bar and get back some vulnerability intelligence on that vulnerability. So similar look and feel to the articles. First tab that we have is a description and self-explanatory description of the CVE in question, and then any links that relate to that specific CVE, publishing org, any mitigation steps that might be available as well. We look to the right-hand side, you'll see a summary of the intelligence that we have on that specific CVE. Is there an exploit available? Has there been chatter observed by threat actors talking about the CVE in question? And then is there an active exploitation that's been observed? Known exploit links, and then any CWEs associated to the CVE as well. Apologies, skipped over the priority score. So we also capture CVSS version 2 and version 3. For use within the platform, and then the date that the CVE was published. We pivot over into the next tab, affected components. So we have a number of components that are affected by this specific CVE, and then related articles, any articles that this particular CVE is associated to. So you can pivot into those articles and see if it were being exploited by a threat actor, then perhaps there would be indicators here, depending on whether it was pulled in via OSINT or published internally, on where the attacks are coming from, domains, IPs associated with those attacks, SSL certificates, or even malware hashes that are observed in relation to exploitation attempts related to the specific CVE. Okay, so that brings me to the end of what I wanted to highlight within the platform today. Excuse me, to kind of recap quickly, MDTI is, it's a tool that can definitely be used and should be used by many teams within a security organization. As we talked about before earlier in the presentation, MDTI can provide that extra context for security operations analysts as they're conducting their investigation, looking for additional context into whether a specific domain or IP address might be malicious, and MDTI can provide that extra context for sure. Threat intel teams, whether it's developing their own threat intelligence or using the finished threat intelligence that's available within the platform already, it's a fantastic fantastic tool to be used by cyber threat intelligence analysts as well. So thank you again, everyone, for listening to me today. And thank you, I see, for Ryan. He was able to join here today and handling questions in the platform. Thank you, or excuse me, in the chat. Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate that. We have, perfect, 15 minutes left for questions. So yeah, fire away. If anybody has any questions on something that I said or perhaps didn't say, let them fly.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And y'all should be able to use the mic functionality now. If you have any questions, feel free to come off mute, raise your hand. Stacy, I see you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
All right, I'm the one asking all the questions because I work on the security team. So I guess my next question is really the enrichment part of it. It's pretty interesting and kind of cool to see all the stuff you can do, but being part of the Microsoft family now, formerly RiskIQ, is how integrated are you with, for example, Microsoft Defender for endpoints or for cloud or Azure ATP? And what I mean by that is we've got all these sources of alerting, potential alerting. They can get enriched into, on the way into alerts and say, okay, how do I can they enrich all these sources and then come to a central interface, not only for our teams, but we want it for the IT teams? Because the way I look at it is security is everybody's job, just not security's job. And if IT teams can make sense of this information as well, that would be super helpful. So we're not telling them to say, hey, go patch your stuff. So I'll start with that. I've got another follow-up on that first, just to see if there's any integrations in place or any integrations in the future, because it's just aggregating all the stuff is the challenge.
Sure. Yeah, great question. Thanks, Stacy. So in short, right now, the focus for integrations from our product and engineering teams was definitely on Sentinel. So the data that's, your sources that are coming into being fed into Sentinel, that was, that's seen as the, single pane of glass, so to speak, as all the data is feeding into Sentinel. Let's make DTI capable of enriching the data that's being fed into Sentinel. I do know that there are conversations right now around Defender for Cloud, endpoint. I don't know of any immediately off the top of my head outside of those two that are being discussed by product and engineering for further integrations. Do I know what those look like? Unfortunately not. Just know that as the details of those integrations are released, those will be published, either first in the private preview. So if there is serious interest, again, just to put that plug in there again to join private preview. That's a fantastic way of, not only getting more familiar with the tool and the data sets that are presented through DTI, but also to, make sure your voice is heard, have an opportunity to, make suggestions of, hey, this is awesome, but it would be even cooler if DTI were able to do X, Y, and Z. That's a fantastic forum for making those types of suggestions. Did I answer your question, Stacy?
It's coming. Basically, it's the summary, and that's probably the same for my Azure ATP and the vulnerability, which was really my follow-up questions. Is when you showed that, you're like, okay, well, I can look that up kind of anywhere, for the same CVEs. But really, if there was integrations to say these affected components, these are the affected components, plus these are all the systems in your enterprise that are affected by those vulnerabilities, would even be better to say, oh, teams can go there to look at these are all the systems that are currently in scope. So that's my punch list to hit those in priorities as well, would really be a nice added feature.
Yeah, so Stacy is not a plant. I just want everybody to know that. You are giving me a wonderful segue into Thursday's conversation around DEASM. Defender for, to recap, Defender for Enterprise Attack Surface Management is going to be Thursday's discussion. And that, where today's focus, MDTI's focus, is sitting in the defender seat looking out towards the broader internet. DEASM flips that view and takes the attacker's perspective and looks at what you look like, what your organization looks like on the internet. So that's the piece, Stacy. I think that's where you're getting is, hey, these components are affected by the following vulnerability. Oh, awesome! It's the first session. That's great. Thanks, Caden. So DEASM is the tool that's going to ultimately tie that together of, hey, this vulnerability exists. The following components are affected. Do I have these components in my internet-facing infrastructure? So that's something that we're going to be talking about on Thursday for sure.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to that. And my only other one was the ATP integration would be kind of cool. And that kind of goes to my branding question was we're just trying to get rid of our Microsoft ATA, which has been deprecated. And I think Azure ATP is the new thing. I haven't used it myself, but if it's similar kind of data and, you know, almost like network logging for, I guess, domain controllers, you could say, you know, looking on the wire or the logs for those things and correlating with like high risk things from MDTI would be really great to say, you know what, we've noticed these 50 users or systems have all visited that malicious website. And this would be another kind of console or dashboard or alerting mechanism to highlight the things, to just really bring it all together to say one interface to show all your stuff and still not having to pivot back and forth. So that's
Yeah. Okay. Again, not a plan. Stacy's not a plan, but speaking to some of the conversations that are happening internally right now of bringing that holistic, we have access to your point, Stacy, a lot of data, both internally and now with the acquisition of RiskIQ externally. So obviously the huge win here would be bringing that all together, as you said, Stacy, in a single place. So I can say that those discussions are happening. Unfortunately, scant on the details for today's discussion, but that is absolutely something that is in the minds here at Microsoft and those that came over with RiskIQ. So please stay tuned.
all right. Thank you.
Sure.
And then you have two questions in chat from
Sure.
Greg. The first one, I have the house and folder in my portal. What activates the target?
Private preview. That is, so the target, Greg, the target that you're speaking to is the threat actor profiles that I mentioned earlier. Like I said, unfortunately, I can't get into that today for CELA reasons, but it's definitely something that's worth a check. Excuse me, check into. I don't know how long it's been in private preview for a little while now, and I don't know. So basically, it's not, it wasn't added yesterday. It's been in private preview for a while, so we can reasonably expect the threat actor profiles to be released within the platform within the near future.
Perfect. And then another question, is the connector available for Sentinel yet?
So, and Ryan, please sanity check me here, but to my knowledge, the integration, or excuse me, the relationship with DTI and Sentinel as it exists today is through the Threat Intel Blade, and that's it. So the official connector is not something that's been published yet.
That is my understanding as well, just to chime in.
Thank you, sir. Greg, yes.
So I'll follow up on the connector question, which has to do with, some of the taxi feeds, and there's also the other feeds that are coming online that are kind of in preview for gathering intelligence. So I just wasn't sure to make sure that this feed, essentially, is there a feed already that it's flowing through? Is it throwing through the generic threat intelligence connector that's built in currently, or is it just through a back-end one that's not a flip switch to turn on somewhere, essentially?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. And that's something that I would have to validate. I don't know with certainty.
Sorry, I might be going off scope.
No, you're fine. It's a solid question for sure. Something that I can follow up on and get back with you with.
Yeah, our org is kind of like a test case for some of the larger institutions that we're affiliated with, and so we pivot a little bit faster. And so we pretty much try to run real time, although it's often not recommended, but we run in preview for a lot of our stuff. So
Awesome.
We're kind of the test bed. So anything that we turn on, we're always excited to turn it on, and especially if it falls within our data grant, right? So we're good.
Great. All right.
Greg, if you are not a member of the Azure Office Hours, that may be a great place to join. They do a lot around Sentinel configurations, and they may be able to help get an answer to that question. If you're not a part of it, let me grab the link real quick.
I think I'm in that one.
And do we have any other questions, thoughts? If not, I did drop a link to feedback for this session. It's a 3-question form, takes about 10 seconds to fill out. If we can get y'all to fill that out, we really appreciate any feedback.
Yes, please and thank you.